One does not simply farm. 3,000 plus rated players who are bullet and blitz experts on chess.com. Unless your name is Magnus Carlsen. And that's exactly what we saw yesterday, the 26th of July, in the Speed Chess Championship starting round. An absolute demolition job of epic proportions, breaking tons of rules. I've got two for the price of one today. Let's dive right in. The first game here, Magnus with white, and he kicks off with d4. He loosens up the fingers. This is online chess, rapid, blitz, fast time control, my favourite tournament of the year, and Lei, in response, the Vietnamese sensation, goes d5. Magnus goes knight f3. Both players develop the horses. They stamp their feet. They bray and whinny. Many top professionals do. Now we see bishop f4, and it's the London system. Magnus wins his own game of guess the opening variation. 10 points to Gryffindor, and now the c-pawn advances. Standard fare in this opening. e3 from Magnus, and now, because you developed this knight, Queen b6 comes, and you don't have this knight here, completely changes the character of the variation. How do you meet the threat on this pawn? Well, you could do something about it, or you could ignore it with the most explosive move of pawn to c4. Now hang on a minute, can black not simply take that pawn? Good for black, right? Hitting the rook. Well, this is the response, and without going deep on the line, basically stuff like rook b1's coming, kicking the queen, white's going to rapidly castle, you get compensation for the pawn. It's just a different game, but the computer gives it level. It wasn't played. Instead, we see pawn e6. Now Magnus goes knight c3. What if you now take the pawn? Well, this time there's knight b5, threatening this monster check on c7. Yes, you can block with knight a6, still there's tempos coming against the queen, different game. We come back from the back cave, because takes on d4 played. Obviously Magnus captures with the queen, loves himself a little queen exchange, can't resist, but bishop c5 played, hitting the queen. Once again, what if captures? We're not going to keep going on it every time. This time rook b1 is strong. But okay, that wasn't played. Bishop c5, queen d2. Now we see bishop b4 creating a pin. Magnus gets out the way with queen c2. Sorry, I've got these tiny little black bugs in my screen. They're crawling around, but they're inside the screen. Really weird and distracting. Castle is now played, and now we see bishop e2. Lei takes the chance to gobble up the c-pawn. He loves it, does a gobble gobble noise, and Magnus doesn't recapture it straight away. He gets the king out of dodge, always knows the best plans. He can capture this one later at his leisure, and now a committal move. Bishop takes on c3, but a correct move when you run all the lines here. Getting rid of that knight, apparently advantageous, giving the bishops. It's deep stuff, perhaps to do with then gaining access to d5 for this knight. Now how does Magnus recapture? Surely everyone and his dog is taking back with the queen, but pawn takes played. Why? Well, if you'd gone with the queen, knight d5 hits both of these, not ideal. So this preserves the bishop pair. Now we see knight c6 played. Rook fd1, queen a5, and now the threat of b5 supporting the pawn is on the way. So Magnus recaptures the most explosive pawn. Rook d8 now a decent move, or b6, trying to do something about this bad bishop, but Lei goes for this very committal, interesting plan of pawn e5, looking to liberate the bishop like that to a much more active diagonal. However, it invites bishop g5, threat to mangle the kingside structure. What's Lei's plan? Well, it's not a good one. Queen c5 best to hit this undefended piece, but instead we get pawn to e4. It's a big mistake. Only given the one question mark, but should really be more. Now the knight's hit. You can't move it or the bishop drops, courtesy of the queen on a5. So of course Magnus takes here. This is Lei's point. He captures on f3, but look at the bar. Rise and rise and rise, because a tactic has been missed. You know, Lei would have thought, right, bishop's attacked. It's got to retreat surely. This is how a line could go. Something like this, and black's doing absolutely fine. However, none of that is forced. What if you don't retreat the bishop? What if you do something else? I'll give you 10 million seconds. If you want to look for the move, Good luck if you find it. Nice attacking idea. Very well done. If you saw what Magnus played, he takes a deep breath and he's like, do you even rook lift, bro? Hits that queen and it can't even come to a4 and hit the undefended bishop. The queen's covering the square. So it comes to b6 here, but Magnus just slides over. You know, he also could have gone to h5 with these devastating mate threats, and it just forces resignation. You cannot stop the checkmate coming. Obviously, there's this threat to crash through here, so we have to ask ourselves, what if g6, the obvious move? If you want to find the killer blow, do go for it. Bear in mind this sniper here. This pawn is pinned. It's not a real defender. Yes, this is the finish. It's rook takes on g6 check. This is forced. The queen crashes through, and that is a checkmate on the board. Many beautiful lines, but that's just one of them, right? That was the end of the game here. Short one, 18 moves, crush, which is why I'm jumping to a second. This was slightly later in the match. Another beautiful one. Magnus decides it's time to go for a king's gambit, and it just gets better, because after pawn captures here, both knights developing, Magnus taking the centre, allowing queen h4 check. Well, what does Magnus do in response? He plays the Bong Cloud, putting the king on e2. It looks absolutely horrendous. g5's now best for black. You have to actually fight fire with fire, but it wasn't played. d6, slightly more timid. Now Magnus goes knight f3, hits that queen, so bishop g4, pin and win, all those pieces getting absolutely skewered on the diagonal. What does Magnus do now though? Picks up the pawn. This is why g5 was better. Different game. And now these are some of the top moves for black here, the way that Lay should have gone, but he didn't know his theory. You know, you can take that queen on d1 when you get to about depth 38, Mariana Trench levels, but he doesn't spot it. Instead we see takes on f3 check, and you cannot recapture with the pawn, or else this bishop drops because of the queen here. So king recaptures, supporting the bishop. Magnus just leisurely strolling up the board, right? I mean, it's like he's in the Matrix. He's taken the red pill. He's walking through the field here, dodging bullets, agents everywhere, but somehow he's Neo. He's still alive on f3. What's he playing at? And after knight f6, another mistake. Lay needs to go back to Grandmaster School. Magnus gets pawn g3, consolidating, kicking back the queen. It comes here with a check now, but Magnus retreats the king, tucks it into bed on g2. Lovely cozy semi-banana hammock. And now how can you do this? We get queen takes on d1. Oh, disgusting. Giving Magnus an endgame, a pawn centre, a bishop pair. It's absolute suicide from Lay. We get castles queenside. There's a move that plays with your head if you don't know the rules of chess and you've had a few drinks, but it is legal. Magnus follows up with sniper to c4, hits f7, and it's so uncomfortable. Rook d7, the preferred move of Stock Shark, cover the pawn, but then there's stuff like this. Bishop g5, rook hf1 on the way, pressure, 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 not ideal. So we come back. What was played instead? Lay goes for something tactical with knight takes on e4, but it is again a mistake. He goes his own way, but does it in the wrong way. Fleetwood Mac not happy. Now we see takes. Now this is the point. Fork the pieces here. But there's something being missed, because after Magnus gets out the forking way, yes, the bishop drops, Lay's regained his piece, but hello, Magnus goes to fork Vegas, population Lay, and he's picking up one of these rooks. It's absolute carnage. It's brutal. Always take rook in the corner. Now we see rook recaptures, and how about this? Pawn to d5. Lay's entire army is just getting routed. Their ruinous remains being smote upon the battlefield. You can't even take on c2 or rook d2, and the knight is trapped. Unbelievable. It retreats to a6, and have you ever seen a more scattered army? Who's the general in charge of this one? This guy ought to be court-martialed. d6 now played. We had the hammer, and here's the anvil. Magnus just crashing through the position. Bishop takes, Lay desperate for counterplay, but Magnus just calmly sets up the defensive camel toe pawn formation. Knight c7, trying to re-enter the game. Rook he1, Magnus blasting with the cannons. He's Napoleon Bonaparte here at the start of the wars, ruining everyone in his path, and now this is unbelievable. Lay just can't deal with this onslaught from Magnus. His head's so spinning, but he completely forgets which way his pieces are supposed to move. What do you even say about that move? I mean, it's just disgusting. We now see bishop e5, and here's Lay's point, knight b6. Aha, this is the tricky point. Or is it? He defends a pawn, threatens knight a4, Magnus takes, we see pawn recaptures, and he's now invading. Lay's getting absolutely kebabbed. That is one active rook here. h5 to preserve a pawn. Let this rook move, and now we get rook d4. King b8 and rook f7 going after this one. Magnus is cooking. It's like a South African braai or an Aussie Barbie. He's got meat on it, courtesy of Lay. And if you now try and defend with this, well, as well as being very passive, you run into this check. The knight block is forced, and that is a lost pony. So we come back. Instead, we see this more active move. Magnus, just sensing the counterplay, calmly plays king h3. Again, the rook can't lift to e2, or you got back rank problems. So we see a6 to give the king room. But now when the pawn drops, it comes with tempo on the knight. Knight a4, and Magnus just retreats. Blocks, defends the pawn here, and the big problem is he's now threatening stuff like rook h4, or let's say rook d5. If b5 were played here, rook d5, pawn's going to drop, king marches in. I mean, it's just terror on the board here. So in this final position here, Lay threw in the towel. He happened to be doing some laundry at the time, and after he put that towel in the wash basket, he also resigned the game. Absolute destruction from Magnus Carlsen. This was the final score. I mean, what do you say? You just don't see this stuff every day. These are blitz and bullet experts, and the only two games Magnus lost were due to disconnection. Crazy, crazy stuff. What a performance. I'm going to cover more of these games because they're exceptional. So do smash subscribe, never miss any. And if you want to see another epic game of chess from Faustino Oro, excellent player, check out the video on screen. Cheers.